Students of Reddit, have you ever lost your temper with a teacher? What's your story? In Heidelberg on my year abroad, my friend and I took a class that we thought would be interesting. It wasn't. The teacher was a complete cow who hated her non-German students, and as we were the only two that semester, go figure, she was oakish with me after learning I was part German, but awful to my friend. We missed 2 classes overall, had to return to our own universities for a little. This was agreed beforehand, so we missed 2 of her classes. Every other time we went to that class was together, so we missed the same amount. However, the woman told my friend she automatically failed her class as she missed 3. But I was fine as I'd only missed 2. We both decided to never go to her class again, or sit her exam. Oddly enough, that exam never showed up on our year abroad credits, and we both passed with high marks. My 2nd grade teacher was Sister Bridget. She didn't like me at all. One day I was feeling ill, and I asked to use the restroom. She told me I was lying. As she tried to tell me why I was a liar, I vomited all over her shoes. I can relate to this. When I was 8, I had a sudden and intense urge to go pee minutes before the school bell was set to ring for home time. I asked the teacher if I could use the bathroom as I was desperate to pee, and she said absolutely not, and I wasn't about to trick her and sneak off home early. I started begging her frantically, but she ignored me and started addressing the class about what to bring for tomorrow. I felt my body give in halfway through her speech and just stood there behind my desk. As the bell rang, all the other children ran out of the classroom instantly. The teacher approached me and sarcastically said, "I thought you were busting to go, huh?" I told her I already had and kept my head down. I think she was just as embarrassed explaining to my mom why she doesn't let me use the bathroom. I hadn't been doing well in calculus all year, but I was trying my best and just struggling. My teacher was one of the cool ones, the kind who act laid back and crack jokes and all that. I think this guy just thought I wasn't trying, and he was as frustrated with me as I was with myself. One day in class he made a sort of passive-aggressive joke at my expense, something about if you would just try harder. He didn't even say it in front of other students, just to me, but I was so over him thinking I wasn't trying that I got up and walked straight out into the school counselor's office. I would have been sent there anyway for walking out in class, so I decided to expedite the process. She was really kind and talked me down from being so upset. Anyway, that was on a Friday, so I didn't see my calculus teacher again until Monday. I was hoping we could just pretend it didn't happen, but no such luck. He pulled me into the hallway to talk. And truly, genuinely apologized. He offered to adjust his office hours, which didn't work for me, to give me extra help. He ended up helping me pass the class barely, but I still passed. I wouldn't have graduated without it. In retrospect, just talking to him more openly from the get-go probably would have been the more mature thing to do. But I was an awkward, self-doubting teenager who didn't know how to ask for help. In the end, the experience helped me improve that skill and advocate for myself. I still hate calculus though. We got this admin in my school who we've nicknamed the Pickinator. In my sophomore year she was patrolling the school, fucking Dolores Umbridge style. She loves ruining kids' days, and she busts kids for the most minor of things. This really annoying kid no one likes came up and snatched my backpack and ran. So I ran after him and ripped it out of his hands. Pickinator comes outside and immediately says, "You two, stop wrestling around and come with me." She escorted us to the office because apparently we were wrestling and fighting. Tried to tell her I was just getting my shit back and she wasn't having it. So I just said, "Well, got my shit back, no reason to stick around now," and went to my next class, which was starting shortly. I got called down later anyway, but my admin pretty much told me she overreacted and to just forget it happened. Pickinator hates me now. I once had some kind of stomach pain, the worst pain I've felt my whole life, and was in science class. I started groaning in agony, and first fucking row in my bud next to me said I needed to leave and go to the hospital. I wanted to, but my teacher the cunt ignored me and the tears that had now started streaming down my face. A minute later I just stood up, walked to the door, and as soon as she tried to talk shit I told her to pipe the fuck down and walked out with a raised middle finger. Then I proceeded to throw up in the trash outside. Good times. I'd have brought that trash can back into the classroom and sat it down pointedly in front of her. 8th grade science class. God, I hated her. For the sake of this, let's say her name was Mrs. B. Early on in the year, Mrs. B had given us a science fair project due in January. We had several class periods over the course of those months as well to work on it. My project was creating an unbeatable tic-tac-toe program. Did work properly, but that's beside the point right now. Because it would take significantly longer to have 20 people the amount of tests we had to do, each play 3 rounds with the thing, so I asked her if I could do fewer and she agreed, allowing me to only do 7 people, which I got done shortly before Christmas break, only about 1.5 school weeks until the project was due. I make sure to thank her for letting me do fewer, as I would never have gotten it done in time otherwise. She turns to me with this confused look as says something to the effect of, "I never said that. You have to do 20 trials like everyone else." I was so insanely furious, I even got a witness who had overheard her give me a lower number come in as evidence. Both me and my witness ended up in detention. I did end up getting the project done, but barely, and it was rushed as hell. I still occasionally think of it and want to punch a wall. It's kind of infuriating when teachers give you detention just for disagreeing. If you weren't being rude, isn't that an abuse of power on her part? Why don't teachers ever get in trouble for this? My IT teacher wanted to inspect my work, spreadsheets or a Word document or something. Anyway, she accidentally deleted the file. I was upset and tried to point out she just deleted my work. She started to shout at me, telling me I should have saved frequently. I shouted back, telling her that wasn't the issue. She outright deleted the file. It got pretty heated. My parents were called. We were outright yelling at each other for a good couple of minutes, to the point where we were both in tears. I was about 14 at the time. She should have known better. A few years later, my sister had her when she went to that school, and that same teacher berated my sister, calling her names, etc. What a bitch. It was a long time ago and I was pretty stressed at the time. I can't remember exactly how, but after several attempts, I wasn't able to restore it. Looking back with what I know now, there are things I could have done to restore it now, even going as far as giving myself admin rights and having a poke around. But I was 14 at the time, being taught IT by a French teacher. How do you accidentally delete a file? How are you the IT teacher and accidentally delete a file? I had a bout of stomach flu which was so intense that it damaged my intestines, and as a result my body couldn't process certain foods for a while. This caused me severe pain. I mainly had cramps that were so bad I couldn't do anything useful anymore except curl up and wait for them to be over. It took me more than a month to figure out a very limited amount of safe stuff to eat, which I ended up slowly expanding on over time. I did miss a few weeks of school when it first started though. Directly after my math teacher's class, she insisted I come to her and explain why I missed so many of her classes. I had a note from my GP ready, but she dismissed it. She told me she could tell that I wasn't sick, but that I was just lazy and lying to everyone, and that she was severely disappointed in me. I literally just walked away, which is the closest I ever got to having a temper tantrum in class. In retrospect, I wish I had told her what I was really thinking, being that I was very disappointed in her. I was pretty sick for a while, and a teacher asked me why I wasn't in the last few classes, and I said I was sick. The teacher said, "You're not sick, you look completely healthy." I said, "Oh, look at you with the all-powerful eyes that can see disease inside of people at an instant." He kind of realized what he said, apologized and told me to sit. He didn't like me anymore, which is rare, and just kind of let me do my own thing for the rest of the semester. When I was a senior in high school, I had an AP English teacher that would grade people based on how much she liked them essentially. I had long hair and stretched earlobes, and she despised me even though I was an excellent student in all aspects. She claimed I didn't turn in assignments on time to justify my grades, so I spoke with my guidance counselor and she investigated for me. Turns out she had sorted completed assignments into piles of good and bad and would arbitrarily grade the papers based on who she felt sucked up to her the most that day. I presented a book report on the Odyssey, which was by far the longest and most detailed presentation of the whole class, and she gave me a D. I told her, "Fuck you, this is the end of your career," and walked out because I had sent an identical copy to the guidance counselor. She presented it to the school board, eventually got her fired, and the best part was she was also a driver's ed instructor and lost her job doing that as well. Apparently I wasn't the first to speak up about her, but I was the one that out the nail in the coffin, and it felt great. Did we have the same teacher? Because I have a very similar story. Teacher hated me because she was spouting some bullshit about how red pistachios don't and never have existed, and me being the pretentious fuck I was, I had to prove her wrong, so I bought a whole bag on the internet and dropped them on her desk a few weeks later. She had never liked me, but after that I couldn't pull a C in her English class. I told my guidance counselor my senior year to put me in remedial English just so I could pass and wouldn't have to take her small school. She was the only non-remedial senior English teacher. So they made a separate class with a student's mom being the teacher. She was only qualified to be a sub technically, and it consisted of me and all the senior boys who wanted to blow off a harder class. You can imagine how well that went. I then went on to graduate with a master's degree in English and a 3.89 GPA, and all the students and other administration of that school who said she would best prepare you for college English can suck it, because all she taught was syntax and didn't even teach us how to do an annotated bibliography or format MLA or APA papers. She taught us nothing useful. So Ah yes, a long time ago in 3rd grade we were having a math lesson and our para was helping our teacher out. I wasn't great at math at that young age and I would ask her for help and then she would ignore me and move on to a different student. I finally got her attention and asked her if she could please help me and she finally said yes and then moved on to a different student, so I got pissed and slammed my fists on the desk. The whole room went silent and I said, "I need help on my math, can I please have some help?" The principal came down and talked to me and asked why I did that because I got reported for being disruptive. She was really nice and I never got sent to the principal's office before, and I told her what happened and she gave a death glare to the para, which is a teacher's assistant. A friend of mine wanted to go to a certain university that was out of state and somewhat tough to get into. The counselor told him not to waste his time as he would never get in. This pissed him off, so he went to the principal, who told him to trust the counselor as that was her job. He applied anyways, got accepted, and taped 2 copies to the counselor and principal's door. He couldn't afford to go anyways, but he was trying to prove a point. I once flipped on my German teacher. I'm German. She obviously didn't like me and her marks were biased as fuck. This one time she gave me an F on a poetry interpretation. Grading that is ridiculous as you can just interpret it as whatever and the mark depends on the teacher's mood. I always got an A for grammar, because the bitch has to give me credit where my work is quantifiably good. After handing the papers back out to the students she did some debriefing about the whole thing, comparing what everyone wrote. She told the whole class how good my thoughts on the poem and some of the passages that I wrote were and wanted me to read out loud what I wrote. I just said you gave me an F, stood up and left. Cunt. I had an English teacher like this too. Nobody believed me until she randomly decided to make us do posters. The next day. I went above and beyond because I knew she liked crafty shit and figured she couldn't possibly give me a bad grade if I was creative. "Oh, this poster is wonderful. Who made it?" I did. "Oh." And she literally threw it in the trash. What the actual fuck? With other people present? Care to elaborate on the situation and or aftermath a little bit? I can't imagine a teacher being able to just trash a student's assignment without immediately pulling it out going haha just kidding. And even that would be cruel. It was that sort of I'm shocked but honestly not surprised kind of feeling. I think my friends pulled it out for me but I didn't want it after that. Other than that I really wasn't that upset about it. To me it was proof that I wasn't actually doing a terrible job, she just played favorites. So I just half-assed everything the rest of the year, got a C. When I was in high school we had this small angry teacher that played rugby, or at least tried to, that was always belittling students to feel better about himself. One day we had physical ed and our teacher couldn't come, so the little and always moody teacher that played rugby came to replace her. Little teacher was trying to show off his skills at rugby and making our class play some game where we had to tackle who had the ball. We didn't tackle hard enough so the little guy joined to tackle some students and show off his grandness. He was having fun being unstoppable and yelling at us if that was all we could do. I was kinda mad so I just went running at full speed at him. Little teacher got tackled and hit the ground so hard. That was something our class laughed about all year. Edit for those wondering, he used to despise and treat us like he was reaffirming his manliness, though he had some good points too and was kinda crazy. It didn't seem like a student-teacher relationship so it wasn't that boring most of the time. I guess that's the reason why most of us still remember that little moody teacher. My 8th grade math teacher. She was the absolute worst and ruined any appreciation I had for mathematics forever. She'd purposely skip chapters and mark correct answers wrong if you wrote numbers a certain way. For example, you never put that little dash at the top of your number 7s or your answer was wrong. Also pop quizzes. She had this rule where a pop quiz could cover any material out of the book even if it was something we hadn't gone over yet. And it's not like we could take the book home to study. It was one of those classes where the textbook had to be left in the classroom. I just quit doing any work for her after that. It royally pissed her off. I had a maths teacher who marked my answer wrong for writing my 7 with the little line through the middle as I didn't underscore my 1s, which prevented me from getting into the top class when I was maybe 14 or so. Fuck her. Obligatory not me. When I was in high school, a girl absolutely lost her shit on my math teacher. The way class generally went was we'd go in and he'd have the day's assignment written on the board. Then he'd spend the first 20 minutes of class teaching new concepts and going over problems, then he'd give us about 30 minutes to work on our assignments and he'd sit at his desk and answer questions. Overall, I really liked this style, but some did not. This girl did not. About 3/4 of the way through the year, she snapped. The class was no different than any other. He explained the new stuff and did some examples and then said anyone who needs individual help just line up at my desk and I'll be happy to help. She fucking lost it. What do you mean that's it? I don't wanna wait in line for 20 minutes, help me now. This is fucking bullshit. Fuck you. She was getting angrier and angrier. And to my teacher's credit, the angrier she got, the calmer and quieter my teacher got. And the calmer and quieter he was, the more furious she would get. Teacher: I understand you're upset, how about we go to the hallway and talk about it? Student yelling: no, fucking help me with this shit here and now. Teacher: calmer, quieter than before now. Terry's no need for that kind of language, we can discuss this civically, I'm happy help you why way I can. Student even angrier and louder: fuck you. Fuck this. I hate this fucking school. Teacher still very calm: I'm sorry you're so frustrated, what can I do? Student now screaming as loud as she possibly can get: fuck this, fuck that, fuck everything, incoherent screaming and cursing. This is when the principal walked in and took the girl out of class. The teacher left for a moment to talk to the principal while we could hear this girl screaming all the way to the office, just every expletive in the book, all directed at the teacher. When it was all over, the teacher calmly walked back in, stood at the front, and said, well, anyone else have a problem with me, I'm happy to discuss it if we can be civil. No one said a word. Okay then. Anyone who needs help come see me. Class went on like normal after that. In retrospect, that teacher handled that shit like a fucking pro in every possible way. Never saw that girl in class or in school again, so something had to have been going on to set her off like that, but I've never seen a student go off like that before or since, and I've worked as a teacher and sub for nearly a decade. Edit to add: something had to be going on with that girl, but I have no backstory. I don't know if she was struggling with grades or with that class, or if that teacher said or did something to set her off I don't know about, I just know what I saw in class. I'm certain something was going on with that girl to set her off, though, either at home or school. I just think that math class was her last straw for whatever reason. When I was in 8th grade, my science teacher decided the day before the last test of the year to give us an extra 16 pages of new material to learn by ourselves and appear in the test. Needless to say, everyone lost their shit and started complaining. I wrote her an angry letter. I was later forced either to apologize or they would tell my parents. I apologized because I may have been a little inappropriate, and by the end of the year she was fired after her first year in the school. She also thought it was a good idea to bring her dogs to part of the lessons in the science lab, when there are 2 kids who are allergic to dogs. Lamau: I had a teacher that thought latex allergies were fake. One day we did an experiment with balloons and a kid said she was allergic to latex and the teacher screamed, no you ain't. Then started rubber her violently with the balloon. She got fired that semester. I flipped my shit on a logic professor who lost my assignments records. You didn't do them. I'm looking at your grades and they are zeros, that's why you have AD. Me: look you dipshit, I have papers you've graded right here. They aren't even good, but they are not zeros. It was over the phone, but eventually I read through his comments on my papers while he was trying to argue with me. That's when he's like, okay. That doesn't sound made up. Scan your papers and email them in. Went from a D to a B. Did a math test and on the paper you could only mark your answer, you had to do the calculations on another paper. Long story short, my teacher lost my calculations paper and wouldn't admit it. He said I didn't hand it over, that I cheated and some other crap. So I went to the school supervisor and asked to take the test again and she let me. My teacher asked to look while I did the test. He made another test, way harder. I freaking aced it, right on front of him. He hated my guts for the rest of high school and I couldn't care less. I had a kid in my math class of my sophomore year of high school that was kind of slow at math, but got the hang of it eventually. The teacher didn't like him for whatever reason and made that publicly known when the kid was sick and missed a test. He came in the next day and asked to retake the test, and the teacher said he would email him when he could come take it. Well, he never did. So 2 weeks pass and the kid is like, when can I take that test, Mr. Collins? And Mr. Collins said, you never came in to take it so you get a 0. Tough luck. So the kid stands up and very calmly and firmly states, "You told me you would email me when to come take it. And you never did. I just lost all respect for you because of that." Mr. Collins threatened to send him to ISS if he didn't sit back in his seat, and the kid replied, "I'm going to go ahead and go to ISS so I don't lose my temper on you." That was really not cool. And he just went to ISS. Mr. Collins never let him retake that test. Fuck math teachers who want you to fail. There was a high school English teacher, Ms. Blades, who was ignoring me for a while. It's worth mentioning that she didn't really like me for some reason. I wasn't a bad or annoying kid. In fact, I was very non-confrontational and mostly kept to myself in and out of class, so I don't know what that was about. Anyway, I had my hand up because I had to use the bathroom and she kept pacing about the room, answering other kids' questions, but would glance at me and immediately look away. After about 5 minutes with my hand up and getting ignored and about to shit my pants, I whistled as loud as I could. Interrupting anyone was completely out of character for me. Well, once upon a time, I had chipped one of my front teeth, so I can whistle extremely loud because of it. My whistle was just that. It was the whistling equivalent of firing a gun in a closed room. Absolutely deafening. The entire room got quiet and she snapped her head around so fast. As her name might suggest, Ms. Blades was staring daggers into my face. Then one kid goes, "Ooh, he just called you a dog, ooh." Then she gained serious momentum from that one off and said, "Oh, I don't think so. You think I'm a dog? You think I'm a dog?" I got sent to the principal's office for disrespecting an ignorant teacher. I used the bathroom on the way there. Couldn't you just go to the bathroom without asking? If she interrupted you, you'd have gotten her attention and been able to tell her what you were doing. 100% this. If it's an emergency, always just get up and go. If a teacher calls you out on it, you say, "I tried to ask you, but you ignored me and now it's an emergency and I'm going to the restroom." I had a teacher once who wouldn't let you leave class unless you had a documented medical condition. This class was an hour and a half long, so obviously someone is gonna need to use the restroom eventually. I was always too shy to just get up and go, which resulted in me having an infection from holding it in way too long since most teachers wouldn't let you go and I didn't have time in between class. Always just go. You're allowed to use the restroom. I know a chap who once lost it in a lesson and threw a chair at the teacher. Some years, like 15 or so back, and the two are now good friends. Essentially, a discussion had turned into an argument, holding up the rest of the lesson, with the chap basically being awkward and pedantic, not letting it go, getting unduly steamed up himself and apparently not realizing that everyone was getting pretty tired. The teacher made some snide remark and the chap flipped, threw a chair and walked out. He waited outside though cooling off, and afterward the teacher went outside as well, said something to the effect of, "I think we both ought to apologize for what just happened," and so they did. And all was well. Oof, that brought back a bad memory. My mother and father passed when I was in my final year of school. I was off school for a while around the time of the second funeral. When I returned to school, my tutor decided it was her job to tell the class what had happened with me, right there in front of everyone instead of letting me do it on my own terms. To say I lost my temper would be an understatement. Wow. Not just at a teacher, but at an entire department. The English department at my first college was staffed by people who, by and large, were assholes. Their idea of a writing workshop was having you email the assignment to the teacher, and then making you pay at least 10 to print out enough copies of your story for the entire class. Why we couldn't just put it up on a message board somewhere they were built into our school's online infrastructure, I don't fucking know. The teacher of this workshop also made it abundantly clear that he didn't give a flying fuck about his students. I'm pretty sure he was a grad student teaching the class for credit, but he acted like a major douche, and pretty clearly didn't read any of the stories beyond a basic skimming. We took quizzes on computers, and he didn't give a fuck if we googled the answers, as long as we got it done before class ended. He drove one of his students to a panic attack on the last day because he had acted like such a creep to them, micromanaging one of their stories. It was bizarre. They also had this weird thing where they would gather every English major in the college into the chapel on campus every Thursday in order to have you listen to someone read from their work. It was advertised as creative writing common time, but it literally just meant sit down, shut up, listen to someone read their works that were rejected from a lit magazine. No laptops, no phones, no books. And if you missed one session of this, out of an entire semester, you failed the class. And you had to take 4 semesters of this if you wanted to pass. By the end of the first semester, I'd had enough. I'd missed a session, and the makeup assignment was just as bizarre. You had to find an audio recording of a work online, read by the author, and analyze how they read it. Like, what? It really got bad on the last day. Undergrad students were finally allowed to read, and either they didn't vet them at all, or they vetted them really poorly, because there was a student who read a graphic depiction of a rape and murder, and the teachers just let them. A few of the other students in the building left in disgust. I almost joined them. Needless to say, I dropped out of the English program at this college and transferred to a university whose English department isn't staffed by psychopaths. Took me an extra year to graduate, don't care. It was better than that. I flipped on several teachers, but this one still bugs me. One of my best friends in high school had died in a car accident, and a couple days later my friends and I told my teacher we would not be able to make it to class because of the viewing. She then proceeded to tell us that we need to plan our days better and how irresponsible it was of us. I've never felt so much rage. Screw you, Mrs. Weaver. I had a Spanish teacher, and in order to gain other students' sympathy, she would make fun of one of the student, and kind of bully not that badly but well that student for this hour of class. Of course, other students would sometimes laugh because class was super boring, so it was like a show. I hated that. Of course she would pick the students that didn't reply back to her provocation, the low-profile type, and of course she would use the perfect excuse just after being mean. "Ooh, it's just a joke, hee hee." Once that guy that never searched trouble to anyone was her victim of the day. She takes him as an example to describe a homeless guy on a picture. After only 10 fucking long minutes, he stands up and leaves the classroom crying. And when she stops him before he leaves, he tells her his dad died the previous night and push her away. Once the door closed behind him, she paused for a second, and take a crying voice to repeat what he had just said. "My dad just died, cry cry, poor baby." Before I realized it, she received my Spanish book in the face, and I called her a ugly slut. Yeah, my insult level isn't great in Spanish. A couple of weeks into my senior year of high school, the president gave a speech about the importance of school or something. I don't know. I wasn't really paying attention. Anyway, all of the teachers in my school had to set up their projectors so we could watch it. My math teacher couldn't figure out how to get her projector working. So, me being the nerdy kid, I offered to help. She had a fit. Started screaming about how she wasn't stupid and how I needed to just sit down and shut up. After a few more minutes of her failing to fix it, she pointed at me and ordered me to fix it. I said, "Fix it yourself." She told the whole class to go next door to watch the speech in that teacher's room. When we got up to leave, she pulled me to the side and told me that when the class got back I was going to stand up and apologize for being so rude to her. I refused and went to join the rest of the class. She spent the rest of the year making my life miserable. She told me on several occasions that she was going to make sure that I failed her class. Sure enough, I failed her class. Only class I ever failed. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe. I'm just trying to feed my family. Club Wojak, hottest voice in the industry.